Hello, Scott Jean, design system engineer, front-end engineer, I guess. I thought I'd provide some context here as to Nacht mode and the challenges that we are faced implementing it, and then sort of the background as to like why we've made this decision, like the conversations I've had with Jeremy and Jeff and others. I thought I'd provide as much context as I possibly can. So the first and foremost is what I've been doing heaps. I've got this bookmark that we can toggle the GLDark class on the root element, and it kind of gives you an idea of the level of reactivity that we're dealing with. So in some regards, it's very good now. Like it was a lot worse. So like the sidebar gets updated, and we have the reboot, or we have like a reset. So we've got the body background and text color updating to our design tokens. So as a sort of shell, it gets updated quite well. And then anything that has explicit GLDark styles applied to it, so using the GLDark selector within GitLab, that will also update because it's reacting to this. But any of the sort of auto magic stuff that happens for the inversion of Sass colors, that's what this shows doesn't happen. But that's kind of by the by. That's not the worst thing because we can emulate that. But what this gives you, I guess, is an idea of the level of adoption that we have in the product and things that are reactive and things that aren't. So things like buttons are fine, kinda. There's a couple of weird things. The checkboxes, are those? No, I don't know what's going on with that. Anyway, and then you've got some, the sidebar's fine, but you've got some weird things like this horizontal rule doesn't update. Labels are fine. Avatars are good. Buttons and all that sweet. Okay, so that's kind of the gist of it. So if we introduce a new mode, so say Nacht mode, we're going to have the same problem as we do with dark mode, in the sense that all of these things that haven't been updated to be reactive to use design tokens will still be the case in Nacht mode. So it doesn't get us any further. Those things still need to be migrated. Yes, we could do those concurrently, but whatever. So what am I trying to explain here? Okay, so what has come up, and this is it's more of a question of component adoption, or where do styles come from that get applied to things on the page. So we've run through this, we have tokens, we have dark tokens, we have component styles, and those components use those tokens, or they use them as utility classes or whatever. Any of these usage is perfectly fine, and we can implement this MR as it stands right now and have Nacht mode in GitLab UI, and that would enable us to see how those components react to a new mode. So we could do that now, and that would be cool. We can experiment it. But the problem becomes when we go outside the bounds of GitLab UI, and we're now dealing with consumers that use those components. And where consumers like design.gitlab use those components is very vanilla. They just slap the component in. But what we're finding, and especially with things like buttons and inputs, so let me clarify, 90%, 99% of the buttons are fine. They're perfect. We've done the migrations. It's the edge cases that have caught us out and things that we weren't aware of that we're working through now. And then that has also come up again for inputs. So when a component's used vanilla, sweet, no work required. There's some stuff like this, primarily with icons or with buttons especially, because some buttons we're applying like a darker icon color and overriding the icon color when the icon color on buttons was gray. So the instance of that was like these buttons here. Those were made darker or lighter. Let me toggle that out. So they were made to be more pronounced. When we update the button so that icons are the same foreground color, these things aren't required anymore. But there's stuff like that. Not a huge deal. Because it's contextual and it's kind of easy to override. Integration MRs, we can remove that. There's stuff like this. So this is mostly common in Haml templates, which we'll go through below, but there is some instances in view templates. It's fine. The styles will still apply. It's outside the remit of this scope. And then we have stuff like this, where we have the Bootstrap class that applies some styles, and then we have the GL component styles. And this is, again, more common in Haml, less common in Vue, but this is where form inputs come into the question. So there's a lot of this kind of stuff. Also, as a fun exercise is how do labels get font weight bold is a very interesting exercise. So a form label being bold in bold. Am I saying that right? Anyway, bold in GitLab comes from Bootstrap, but also comes from like some random CSS somewhere. It's never really like a component style or anything of that abstraction. Anyway, sidebar. Then we have stuff like this, where something just looks the same as GitLab UI. It has no relationship to it whatsoever. And then we have these. So these are kind of our custom styles. So, if we're looking back at our template here for our MR view, this would be all these kind of things like widgety, timeline, comment threads, blah, 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 blah. These styles have existed for a long period of time in, what do you call it, kind of legacy styles. Difficult to untangle. These are kind of the where the effort is in migrating these to design tokens so these can work effectively. And then we have these. So again, the example I used before, like a label. Not a concern for us, we don't care because it's font weight, not color. But where do those styles come from, I think is very interesting. So, I've written down a stack here. So we kind of got this, what do you call it? Yeah, I guess stack where things come from. So they're either user agent reset styles, so coming from the browser itself, coming from Bootstrap resets, coming from Bootstrap styles on the HTML element itself, coming from GitLab HTML selector styles, so somewhere in framework or whatever, or GitLab UI HTML selector styles. I think this is far less common, maybe like keyboard or something, I'm not so sure. Okay, enough riffraff, let's talk about the meat examples. So, little drink break. So we have buttons, and this is the one that we came across. So the vast majority of buttons are fine, 99% hunky-dory. They are GL buttons. They use design tokens, and they toggle automatically, as you can see here. Beautiful. But if we go to... This was having an issue associated to it. Any of these have an issue? Here's what I prepared earlier. Yeah, these are issues. This is fine. So if I go... That's another epic. This issue. And I open up... Where'd my branch availability go? Oh, probably because it's closed. Okay, that's fine. What's an open one? This one? Yeah, cool. All right, sweet. So we open this drop down, and I toggle these. Oh, I suppose I can actually illustrate what I'm talking about. So this button is styled from GitLab UI, and this button is styled from GitLab itself. So it inherits some styles. So it is a GitLab UI button, but it has these properties coming in. So background color, border color, color. These are coming from application styles, which is coming from this button SAS file, which is applying specifically to this, create MR dropdown, blah, blah, blah. These kind of legacy styles. So when these would be updated for dark mode, so say that text becomes dark, so much like what we're doing for our badges to improve contrast, the text here would still be white. Things like that. Okay, so yeah, and so that's where we have these kind of things applying. There is, there's fragility to it. Again, kind of edge casey because most of the buttons are fine. But to have that confidence and knowing that the styles apply throughout consistently throughout is the concern. So yeah, so mostly in Haml we'll have stuff like this. We'll have like button dot button, GL button, or things like this in Vue, that's fine. It'll import or use the GitLab UI styles. It's things like this which are concerning, because this is very loosely styled to GitLab UI, but not one-to-one. So these will still rely on the inversion behavior and be different to if we were to update buttons in any way, shape, or form, or we will actually, because they need to be updated for dark mode anyway. So yes. But again, that's fine. But it's where we get to like inputs and custom styles where it gets trickier. So form input is not really being used everywhere. We have instances of things like form control, I believe it's called, from Bootstrap. And again, it's just kind of loosely styled like a form input, or the GL form input. So in light mode, it looks fine. When the inversion happens, it looks fine. When we update properties for dark mode, for Nacht, for whatever, it doesn't look the same. It inherits this, the properties, or it inherits the styles from the color inversion that we do with Sass. So that we have this kind of fork of two different input styles. Okay, so let's talk about, so let's not go into CSS properties right now. So this is the crux of the problem, is that when we introduce a new mode, it's fine in GitLab UI, because within GitLab UI, as we build out the tokenization of components, those will react as we expect. It's when we get into consumers, and most explicitly GitLab itself, it's hard to have confidence to know that these styles are going to be applied consistently throughout. So updates to the value of design tokens, so when they differ from the current values that we have for like our inversion tree or whatever, so our inversion dark mode styles, is where we get inconsistencies, and it's hard to know where those are coming from. Okay. So then if we multiply modes, so if we have Nacht mode, high contrast mode, dim mode, whatever you want to have, these issues are still going to arise. These will need to be resolved to have those, roll out properly and to see those react properly, I believe, anyway. And then there's another problem. So in GitLab UI, GitLab UI never really had a concept of GLDark as a class. I believe it still doesn't, outside of the token generation itself. This class, so the class only ever exists on the root element. And this is another area where new modes become more complex in consumers like GitLab. So where we have one class on the root element, we can toggle that class to be nothing, GLDark, GLNacht, GLDimmed, whatever. That's fine. Those properties swap out. Super simple. Where we have styles that are within the framework or components or features or whatever in GitLab that use the GLDark class explicitly, these are now changes to those tokens being inherited and being applied as we would expect. And these are very these come from a context of being legacy overrides for colors. So things like this, where in dark mode, to improve the rendering of it, the visual rendering of it, we've done something like this, where in light mode it's white, and in dark mode it's grey tint, which is the inverted color as well. So that would be grey, I want to say 950 maybe. So this would be the same now as doing something like, I believe, GL background color default. And if I spell that correctly, it would actually work. And this all comes from this white value doesn't get inverted the same. So in light mode, it's FFF. In dark mode, it's, for argument's sake, 333 or whatever. It's not the 950 value, which would give us this experience. This experience. Okay, anyway, so that's one example that can be migrated to that. So we need to do this work so that these will work, so that this won't react weirdly in the way that it's currently, it's reliant on the inversion behavior. We want to move away from the inversion behavior so we can toggle these classes. It all happens at one point. Sorry, let me clarify that. Okay, so that's fine. Well, not fine, but, fixable. So again, exact same instance with the merge request tabs holder. We do the same behavior here. But then we get stuff like this. So timeline content. So this is a recent addition where GLDark is now applying a design token. This one gets weird. So if we had nucked, what does this look like? Is this GL nucked? Like so? And we assume that both of those are strong? Or is it like a repetition of that? And then this one is, I don't know, subtle or something. And maybe this is subtle. So you can see the problem here. This doesn't scale, because then we're going to have to do this for every single node in every single place. And say there's, I don't know, for argument's sake, 100 instances of GLDark in the code base. That's going to quickly become 200. Or we need to, first migrate those to be sensible design tokens where that actual switch is happening at the root level. So the root class controls this, the value of GLDark or GLNuct or whatever we call them. And where this occurs at the very, very tippy top, automated in design tokens. We don't need these per consumer. So we have, 1, 2, 3, default, dark, nuct. Rather than potentially, 200 or whatever in the code base. So those are the two main things. Is the adoption of components, or at least component classes, or at least design token styles coming from components, or from GitLab UI, and GLDark specific overrides are probably our two biggest frictions from a smooth rollout of a new mode like Nuck mode, where things just kind of auto magically work. So the outcome that I see, is that we need to have tokenization or adoption of tokens more prevalent in the consumer GitLab. So migrating GLDark class usage and migrating timeline content or whatever these, UI content pieces are to use design tokens, preferably through like Tailwind classes or whatever. And then we can toggle the class here, and that inversion, or should not use inversion here. The changes to design tokens happens in one place, one source of truth, and then scaling modes is very, very straightforward, very, very rudimentary. Okay, so that's my coverage of this. I hope that makes sense. I hope that provides a bit more context from the code aspects as to why this is trickier than initially we thought. But still possible in GitLab UI. So if we want to progress with that, we can progress with that. Anyway, see ya.